Hey Taurus, and welcome to September 2020. I pulled an archetype for you, and I got the Underworld, which, look, I'm gonna start pulling other cards to, get a deeper story, but the Underworld, shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, collectively, we've all been in the Underworld, have we not? 2020 is a little bit dark. So, yeah. So I hope that you're not freaking out too much, because this is an opportunity to get real and to get clear. And the Underworld puts me in mind. Okay, yeah. I mean, Taurus, this isn't like, if this resonates with you, September is not per se the easiest month, but I think it will be a fruitful month. The Underworld is kind of living in hell, right? It's kind of like being in quarantine. It's kind of like coronavirus. It's kind of like being in the middle of a global pandemic. It's kind of like living in a very anxious, distraught world as it is, and then here you are. This card puts me in mind of the heroine's journey, which is Inanna. She descends to the Underworld. Could be Dante's Inferno. It's sort of like, you gotta go there. You gotta go to hell. You gotta go to the dark places in your mind. You gotta go to the places that scare you. Why? Well, usually in the Underworld, there's a bunch of gifts there. There's retransformation, there's rebirth, there's understanding, there's clarity, there's healing, there's stuff in the Underworld that you can only... The Underworld changes you into, a very strong person. And, when I pulled the Underworld for you, I don't want to throw shade at someone, but I'm going to kind of, and hopefully she never comes across this reading, but someone was talking about Peter Pan, the fairy tale, whatever. And she's talking about how, Peter Pan is, how we connect with our child selves. But for me, Peter Pan brings up all of this really dark shit. Child molestation. If you think about, Michael Jackson, loved Neverland, and, had a whole ranch where he, I mean, look, great music, but he molested kids, right? That's the Underworld. Or I was in my therapist's office, and I was, reading a book about, and it wasn't a book, it was Entertainment Weekly, but it had, a whole chapter on Bobby Driscoll, who played Peter Pan, and it's, this kid who was a child star, and he, drank himself to death, or, overdosed, at, 18, or, he was very young, so, the kid who played Peter Pan literally died from, addictions and, abusive, behavior, he was just, so, when I'm talking about Peter Pan in connection to the Underworld and, this dark imagery, I think that, in a way, the Underworld and acknowledging the Underworld is a gift, because the opposite of the Underworld is kind of this love and light type vibe, which is spiritual bypassing, which is not acknowledging the underbelly of literally everything. We live in a world that is a pretty dark place, right? There's a lot of bad shit that happens, and I'm not asking us to focus on the bad shit or to stay here in the Underworld. By no means. We want to get out of the Underworld, but I think that the blessing of acknowledging that the Underworld is a real place and that bad things happen and that it's not all sunshine and roses and rain, it's about getting real and about having the awareness and the knowledge and kind of the experience to be able to deal with reality. So this could be depressive states or anxiety too, but I think, I know people who are really depressed right now, understandably, right? But I think that there is strength in being able to hang out in these dark places and to kind of not like I don't want us to stay here. I don't want us to stay in the underworld, but I am trying to say that the underworld is a part of life. It's like the yin yang, like as much as there is the lightness, there is this darkness. And I think when we aren't pushing it away, when we're not pretending it doesn't exist, when we're acknowledging it, when we're able to kind of have an acceptance of sometimes being sad is part of life, sometimes being depressed is a rational response. Instead of trying to beat ourselves up or to like try to like desperately fix it and feel like, oh, like I need to get out of the underworld, if like we can kind of find the fortitude, I don't know, the acceptance, the kind of, I think a sense of humor is wildly important in the underworld. When we can kind of laugh at the darkness and have a dark sense of humor about it, I think that is a saving grace, because this is part of life. And so I feel like for you, the opportunity in September is to sit with all this darkness and to kind of make peace with it in a way, or to just see it, or just to witness it, or just to be like, there it is. And we got Death in reverse, we got the Moon, we got Five of Wands in reverse, we got Page of Cups in reverse, Six of Wands in reverse, Knight of Cups in reverse, the Hermit, Ten of Swords, Six of Cups, and the King of Cups in reverse. Okay. Well, I definitely feel like you feel like nothing's going your way. And, like, that's part of what's maybe making things feel so hard and so heavy and so dark, is because you're like, wow, like, this definitely I'm put in mind of Cabaret. Maybe this time I'll win. She's like, everybody loves a winner, so nobody loved me. Lady Lucky, Lady Happy, Lady Peaceful, that's what I long to be. Well, all the odds are in my face. So, like, basically, I kind of get that. Like, you're just like, God, like, nothing ever works out. When is it going to be my turn? When am I going to win? When am I going to get out of the underworld? Like, an impatience. Like, God, like, things have been so hard for so long, and 2020 has been relentless, and I just can't take anymore. There's definitely a, like, I can't take anymore feeling. And I'm not trying to predict doomsday at all. I'm just trying, in this reading for you, Taurus, if it is resonating with you, I am just trying to kind of like, A, validate your feelings, and B, just say that like, there is a rhyme and a reason to all this, even if we don't fully understand. I think with the Six of Wands in reverse, it's like truly the idea of like rejection is protection. All the things that haven't worked out in your life were for a reason. There maybe things would have even been darker, right? Or like you would have like not been having, I just think that there's always kind of blessings in what hasn't worked out for us. That we have to have trust and faith in kind of like, there is some order to this world, and like there is some, like, just because we're in the dark night of the soul moment of the movie doesn't mean it doesn't have a happy ending. But is the happy ending as satisfying if we don't have this kind of like questioning and existential angst? I don't know. So there's that. I feel like the message here is like, please trust that what hasn't been working out is for a reason, and you're being redirected to something that is much better for you. And you, even if you consciously, like, your mind thinks you wanted some certain things in the past, they just didn't happen because it wasn't yours. And it wasn't yours just because there's something that is yours. This was the wrong thing. The lack of success. Okay, Six of Cups. I think in the underworld, there is an opportunity to look back. Imagine that in the underworld, there is like a lake, and in the lake, you can look in it and you can see all these memories. I think there is value right now in kind of looking back on the past, all these things that you were maybe upset, didn't work out, looking back on the past, and just kind of understanding how you got here. Because also, I would say the underworld plus with the moon, I think this is really also you visiting your subconscious mind, right? This is like the shadow lady. This is, and what I was saying at the top of the reading about like the blessing of the underworld is being able to acknowledge the truth, right? So that you're not missing things, and so that you're not glossing over elements of the story that are pertinent, right? So like per Peter Pan is kind of a dark story, right? Like, yes, it's about childhood, and yes, it's about believing in magic, and yes, it's about kind of like using your imagination, but there's all these dark sides about like people exploiting children, and like it's also kind of like Neverland is a metaphor for death. So I think what I am trying to say with the Six of Cups and the moon and the underworld is like, when I can like look back on my past and just see it for what it is, and like now maybe because I have distance from some of the scarier things that have happened to me, if I can like look back on it now, okay, so I'm like looking back on my past, I'm looking back on some of the scarier things that have happened, and I can kind of reframe it, not in terms of like changing the facts of what happened, but I can see like, oh, like I overcame that scary thing in the past, and I lived through it, and I'm not going to make those same choices again. I think that when we don't acknowledge the underworld, we risk making choices, again, that like aren't actually in our interests. I'm actually going to kind of read, I feel called to read from the book, because I don't know, I keep going on about all this stuff. Maybe if I can find it. Here we go. Okay. Try as we might, the darkness pulls us into its depths through disturbing dream images, unexpected accidents, illness, war, conflict, and ultimately death. Not visiting or denying its existence altogether is what gives it dangerous power. Traversing its forces to bow humbly to the greater forces that be, while summoning the inner strength we previously underestimated. Take solace that the underworld subsumes everyone from time to time, making us deeper friends, more intimate partners, soldiers of light amid our shadowy times. Facing darkness and choosing light is the most profound calling of all. When light, bravery, depth, facing of deepest fears. When dark, denial, suppression, evil, unconsciousness. So that's what I was trying to say in way more words. With this, the kind of like the things that didn't work out, that was for the best. And now maybe I have an opportunity to look back on my past, some of the worst things that have happened, and to see, like, I have a friend who, like, has gone to very scary haunted houses in Detroit, right? Like, way intense shit. And she was, like, kind of feeling anxious about something, and I was like, I kind of have a hard time understanding how you're anxious about that when you, like, willingly went into, like, the scariest haunted house in the world. Like, for me, that would be traumatic. So I think that with the moon and the Six of Cups, it's like, when I look back on my past, maybe I can put how much I've overcome really in perspective, how I've already really kind of visited the underworld, and maybe I've done scarier things than the things that feel really intense right now. Like, the things that feel intense right now feel intense because they're in my present moment, but when I look back and I see my journey, I'm like, wow, I've already kind of been through the worst. Like, this isn't really actually as bad as it was in the past. It just feels intense right now because it's happening. But I can count on myself. I can have this kind of strengthening of my understanding of myself. Like, I can do this. Like, I've been through it. And also, again, subconscious mind, I'm illuminating things. I'm getting real. It's like, I feel like the underworld is like a lot of truth telling, right? What I've been trying to say about Peter Pan. Like, I'm not just living in like the fairy tale illusion of things. I'm living in the reality of like what the whole picture is. So yes, it's all these nice things, but also this darkness is just part of life. And I'm finding maybe a sense of wholeness or kind of, and also I think that whole notion of like you're the light, right? The Hermit is a card that's definitely about going inward. So I feel like a lot of this is not external situations that are happening to you beyond the global pandemic or whatever, and maybe some job loss or whatever, but it's like I'm going inward because I'm also like seeing like how is this part of this deeper, intense pattern that's been happening maybe your whole life. Again, to talk about going in the past and kind of like really like going really far into the subconscious mind. The Hermit is like, I'm going inward because inside of me, I have the light to lead my way out of the darkness. The Hermit is like, the answers to all of this scary stuff is within me. I have the answer. And so I'm going within, I'm taking the solitude. I'm like kind of maybe meditating or something. Again, I'm like exploring the subconscious mind and seeing it for what it is and seeing my past story and seeing what hasn't worked out and reframing it so that I can kind of have that light to navigate. I mean, for me, obviously in quarantine, I feel a little bit trapped, but I'm like reading over my old journals and I'm like writing, and like I wrote like in 2007 that I felt trapped. So it's like, okay, well, that was definitely not in quarantine then. So how is this present underworld situation really just illuminating larger patterns that have been going on for a long time? And how can I, the Hermit, you know, maybe this is her reading her old life journal entries from 2007 and being like, hey, wow, there's those deeper patterns, those deeper subconscious patterns that have been going on, so I can finally address it and I can be my own light to guide my way out of here. I mean, we got the Ten of Swords, which I love, which is like ending these cycles and being done with them inside of yourself. I'm not saying that you can end the global pandemic just by going within. I don't know that it works that way, but what I do know is that if you go in within and take up this challenge of kind of exploring the past, exploring your subconscious mind, of kind of confronting fears of death or of transformation or of what's been holding you back or what's been keeping you stuck, because that's what I got with this, right? I mean, it's such a, this card and this coming up together is just like, you know, da-da-da, right? But with death, it's like, so where have I been resisting transformation? Where have I been like deliberately choosing the patterns? Not deliberately choosing, but where have I been kind of avoiding this pain too? This like the crux of this existential pain that I've been feeling that has been this pattern of the underworld. How can I get real by acknowledging the truth? You know, it's nicer to tell story. I'm like going off on Peter Pan, so I guess it's just my example, but it's like nicer to tell the story when you're just like seeing like the Disney cartoon version and you're like, oh, it's so cute. Like they fly and like that's fun. But when you consider, okay, well, there's all these layers to this, right? And then it's like, okay, well, I can grieve that now and I can maybe choose differently. I mean, Michael Jackson is a good example of this in a way. I mean, he has made some of the best pop music of all time, but he also molested children. So it's like, if I listen to Thriller, I mean, it's uncomfortable, but maybe I have to kind of acknowledge, well, when I listen to this, I'm also listening to something that was like deeply painful and traumatic for a lot of people, a lot of kids. And is that worth it? Maybe that's something I can let go of. Maybe I don't need to idolize this person just because ignoring the truth feels more comfortable. Maybe if I just, as uncomfortable as it is, if I can acknowledge the truth, then I can move past something and I can kind of find healthier new music that is less problematic. I don't know. I don't really know that that's what you're really realizing in September, but I do feel like on this deep soul level, it's like you're getting to the bottom and to the root. I mean, look, this is like worms and like the underworld is like also like the soil. It's like where roots are. It's like where things grow. So it's like if I'm understanding like what's underneath, then I'm really getting to the bottom of things again, and I'm not resisting the transformation. I'm ending cycles that have been maybe repeating themselves, so then I can exit this underworld and live in a happier place and have kind of more fruitful bearings of like what I'm growing in my life too, to think about like soil, what am I planting in there? And if I'm not addressing kind of what is wounded or what needs to be weeded out, then it's just perpetuating itself. So, Taurus, I've gone on and on about this, but I really feel like the opportunity in September is really to get to the root and to address some truth and to find some really like solid healing and change and like ending bad toxic things that have been going on way too long. Maybe longer, much longer than maybe even like past life shit, you know? Maybe even past life shit. Like deeply karmic patterns that have been plaguing you, and I use that word deliberately, for too long, and getting to the root and to the bottom of it by willingly facing this and having courage. We got like 3-quart water cards in reverse. I feel like this is just you being afraid of your feelings. You being afraid of your vulnerability. You being afraid of being responsible for your feelings. You being afraid of the messages that your feelings, like, I feel like part of the underworld journey is like, what have you not been feeling? What have you been too afraid to feel? I mean, I think sometimes I'm watching, to make it a little bit lighter, I'm watching The Holiday, and The Holiday does not really completely pertain to the underworld, but in it, Cameron Diaz's character is talking about how she hasn't cried in like forever, like since her parents divorced when she was 15. So honestly, that's trauma light, not to judge someone's trauma, but like, we're talking about heavy shit with the underworld here. So anyway, Cameron Diaz can't cry because her parents got divorced. That's this energy. It's like, it still hurts her, it's still painful, but it's just like, she's blocked it off. She's stopped it, but it's gonna keep festering, the wound, until it's addressed. So there needs to be a release. There needs to be a feeling it to healing it. You have to feel it to heal it. And this might be a lot of crying that you're not doing, like Cameron Diaz. And when you cry and release and kind of like can flood that shit out, then you can release it, let it go, when you can acknowledge, again, as I'm saying, the truth of situations that haven't been working, or you can like kind of address the patterns and like feel those feelings and kind of acknowledge them and accept them. And like, I think a lot of this is like dealing with the truth, and the truth will set you free. The truth not only of what you've been ignoring about situations or trying to gloss over, but about how you feel about them. Maybe it's like, yeah, I just feel like maybe there's like a tough girl or tough guy attitude of like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. But it's like, it was a big deal to you for whatever reason, this thing that happened in the past. It did matter. And so you're having to go back and face it and just feel all that shit so that you can get over it. I'm not pushing you to get over it, but I'm just saying so you can end it. End the pattern of like repressing it, so that you can have the transformation and the release. But this is a release too. 5 of Wands in reverse. This to me just feels like there's all this inner turmoil that maybe ends up getting projected as external turmoil, but it's all really this underworld journey and this opportunity to kind of go within your psyche, go to all the scary parts of your psyche, go to the past, maybe again, past lives, figure out what hasn't worked was in your highest benefit, but why haven't things been working out? What are you not completely addressing? Can you go within? Can you have this courage to kind of like find the light within you in the darkness? The light to get out of the darkness is within you, so that you can address conflict that has been maybe like kind of like slowly eating you up inside. Maybe this inability to like really feel or acknowledge past hurts or past wounds or past trauma, things you haven't felt yet, things you've been too afraid to feel, things you've been afraid to emotionally take responsibility for, things you've been afraid to admit to yourself, things that you've been afraid to be vulnerable about, messages, and like that kind of thing. And in this process, maybe resisting your transformation, resisting dealing with it, but in facing it and confronting death, basically, your fear of death even, right? And confronting your fear of death, what do you gain? You gain the end of a cycle. You gain the end of, like, letting the fear control you and of, like, being trapped in the underworld, right? You can escape the underworld finally when you kind of just acknowledge and accept, I'm in the underworld and that's where I'm at, so here I am, hello. You know, hello darkness, my old friend. That's the vibe. Hello darkness, my old friend. What's going on? Let's talk. Let's get real with each other. Let's figure out what's been happening between us. And really get to the roots. To the roots of the issues. Very intense reading, but I think a beautiful, like, opportunity for you to really, like, grow into yourself and really, like, find this unbelievable healing that is really only possible by doing this kind of shadow work. So, I'm wishing you all the best, Taurus. I'm rooting for you, and I love you, and I'll see you again in October. Bye!